It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. Welcome back. I am delighted to have you return, or if you're a new listener, welcome. Hopefully you find some useful information about politics, religion, and or money. If you have a topic you'd like me to cover, let me know. You can email me, phil@Polaris Financial Planning. Later in the show, we have an interview with David Fitzgerald, a well-known and respected author about Jesus and the fact that he probably doesn't exist. And if he does, there's not really good evidence for it. And we're going to talk about his recent books, a new book that's coming out hopefully by the end of this year. That's my fantasy. And other works that he's worked on, and our recent re-meeting. We've met many times over the years, but at the BajaCon convention in Canada. I also have a nice segment on the Ioniq 6 car that I just bought 2 weeks ago. You've heard my car buying drama and saga, but now during the segment later today, I'm going to talk about the car itself and some of my rationale of why I bought that specific car. But before I get into that, I want to mention Schwab, the transfer of everyone that has an advisor, had an account at TD Ameritrade. Those accounts have now successfully moved to Schwab. Yes, I am recording this part on September 5th. I did take the end of day data from September 1st for everyone that had accounts at TD Ameritrade. And then I've compared it to opening dollar amounts, or as close as I could get this morning, to what's at Schwab. And virtually every single account matched to the penny. Please, if you have an account at TD Ameritrade, whether you are a client of Polaris Financial Planning or not, double check yourself. It's very important. You want to make sure your money is still your money. But I did check everything. Looks fantastic. Wow. Whew. What a relief. There are a handful of accounts that had a different dollar amount. And so I went and dug into them, each and every one of them, and it was caused by three things. Money went out, money came into Schwab, money went out of Schwab, money came into Schwab, and the money came into Schwab could be a contribution or deposit that you have made that may be automated, or it could be dividends. So you will see probably for weeks, maybe even a month or two, dividends that show up that might go to TD Ameritrade first. And probably each day they're going to get converted over to Schwab. That is because the person or the fund or the stock paying the dividend has your account and your account information on record, and they're going to send it to the information on record as of a certain date. And that date might be August 21st or August 25th or August 3rd. And so wherever the account, wherever you held that investment previously, as of a certain date, they're going to send it to that account. And then TD Ameritrade /Schwab will coordinate moving it over to your new account numbers at Schwab. Eventually, all of those investments will know that you now have an account at Schwab. And going forward, they'll do that. But you might see that for days, weeks, maybe even a couple of months, a few things. I have already talked to a few clients this morning that have successfully had money automatically deducted from their account and sent to their bank. Whew, that's a big burden, a big concern. Not even big. That was a concern that it looks like that's going to work. If you are in the position where you're getting money out of your account that used to be at TD Ameritrade and now is at Schwab, if you expected that to happen on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th of September, that probably will happen today or tomorrow or the next day. If you don't see it, it might have glitched and for whatever reason not made it through the conversion. So if you're adding money, you're probably going to be okay for weeks to maybe a couple of months. But at some point, if you're pushing money from your bank, you're going to want to make sure you link to your new Schwab account numbers and Schwab as a company and make sure those links are set up. If you had money leaving TD Ameritrade and now leaving Schwab, it looks like the vast majority of that information has indeed transferred over. And I've seen people having money added to their accounts at Schwab from an automatic connection that they had. And I've seen money moving out. But double check that if you're expecting money in the next week or two, because you get out money probably monthly. That's generally what I like to use. Keep an eye on that. Make sure, because there's that little window of limbo, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of September. If you were expecting money to leave TD Ameritrade, it couldn't because everything was closed for the weekend. And then, of course, Schwab starts on September 5th. Will Schwab go back and look at those accounts and see things that didn't move that were expected to move on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th of September? That's the one area that I'm concerned. Like I said, I've already seen some of those work. So it might not work for you, but it looks like in general it's going to work a good chunk of the time. So that's fantastic. So I wanted to make sure I covered that right up here in the beginning of the show. It looks like everything is transferred over. Everything is the right dollar amounts on every single account. I built the data sets to double check all of that. So that's fantastic. Go log in to Schwab if you haven't already. Make sure you know how to get in, how to look around, double check the amounts yourself. If you have any accounts linked outside, make sure those are still set up and or fix them. If you have problems with logging in or getting your password or something about the Schwab website, you will have to call Schwab. Do not call Phil. I cannot change your password. I cannot see your password. I cannot tell you what your password is. That is the thing between you and Schwab. I can see your accounts. I can see what you hold. I can see what funds you have and how much money has moved in or out. But there's other things that I can't do, and that's for security purposes. And I think we all agree that it's important for your accounts to have a lot of security. I don't want to be able to change your address. I don't want to be able to change your password. I want all of that out of my hands. I just want to focus on doing my job, which is trying to help you make a reasonably good amount of return with a reasonably modest amount of risk and make more and more money over time. Anyway, that's the intro part of the show. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to listen to a segment about the Ioniq 6. And after that, we're going to talk to David Fitzgerald and we're going to discuss, did Jesus actually exist? And I know you're going to like it, so don't go anywhere.
My name is Annie Drian, and I'm founder of Cosmos Studios and an honored to have been the longtime collaborator of Carl Sagan. And I'd like to say that I think it's just the opposite of what you're saying from my perspective, humbly. One is that I think that science tolerates the unknown in a way that religion doesn't. My argument is not with people who search for God. My argument is with people who feel that our understanding of God is completed. And those are the people who make so much of our existence on this planet such a hell, because they really think that they have the right to kill other people, to hurt them, because of what they understand God's will to be. That's a very destructive thing. So science is, the whole methodology of science is saying that we are not permitted these absolute truths that religion pretends to have, that we do not know the answer to these questions, and not only that, but the little that we think we do know, if you can prove us wrong, we'll give you our highest reward. And that's part of the methodology. That's part of the whole functioning of the system itself. So yes, in answer to what Joan was saying earlier, scientists do terrible things. Scientists have biases. Religious people do terrible things, and they have biases. But absolutely intrinsic to the whole the methodology of science is that error-correcting mechanism, which says we must never lose sight of that. That's not in religion. That's not present at all. Talk about humble. It's the fact that we do science and that we can bring ourselves to see that little tiny earth in Carolyn's presentation. That is humility. What science has done for us spiritually is that it has been the only thing that I know of that has compelled us to wean ourselves of our infantile need for centrality. And that was present, that is very much the essence of so many religious formulations of where we come from, why we came to be. It's the sign of mental health, that we can bear to think that this planet was perfectly fine for 4.5 billion years without us. That cosmic evolution goes on for 13.5 billion years before we even get here. How long have we been in science? How long have we systematically been looking at nature? Not even 400 years. And yet science gets us out to Enceladus. It takes us out of the solar system. It enables us to wean ourselves of that spiritual narcissism which compelled us to be at the center of everything. So when it comes to humility, when it comes to a tolerance for ambiguity and for the unknown, I think science worships the unknown. I think scientists are most comfortable in that place of not knowing. And that's where they live. And that's the great strength of science. So I would respectfully disagree.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. This special segment is about the Ioniq 6. That's the car that I just bought, electric car that I just bought. And I've had a few segments on the car buying process, which, you know, it's ugly, it's awful, but I shared some experiences and thoughts about that in the previous episodes. I am not going to go over that kind of stuff again. What I want to talk about here is, why did I buy the Ioniq 6? Why that car? There are many reasons, some good and some not so good, and some you will not agree with and others you will like. But, you know, I just kind of wanted to walk you through the process. And the big dilemma I have had primarily is for my next electric car to replace the Chevy Bolt EV. That's Bolt with a B for Bravo, not V for Victory, because they have a Volt and a Bolt. But the Bolt EV, delightful car. I still highly recommend it. It is an excellent car for the price. It is an economy car. So understand that you're getting an economy car, but it has 260 miles of range, which is probably good enough for most people. But the thing that was a real buzzkill for me was it charges really, really slow. And so if you're out on the road, not only does it take considerable time to charge, which you can survive through. I mean, if you're normally driving this car around town, if you have another vehicle, or if you can take and schedule the appropriate amount of time to drive a really long distance like we did from Chicago to Orlando, we broke it in 2 days and we charged and we mapped and everything worked fine, but it is extra time. So the Bolt probably is not for someone who's regularly going much over 250, 300, 400 miles in a day. And of course, from Chicago to Orlando is 1,100. From the specific locations, for me, it was like 1,150. It added 6 hours of charging time. That's why we did it in 2 days. Well, so, you know, if you have no urgency, no hurry to go, you can do that. The Ioniq 6, of course, will charge much faster. The Bolt had a peak charging rate of about 55 kilowatt. And this is something that you're going to have to learn and get used to if you want to own an electric car. Side note, amazingly, I've been to a couple charging areas, charging stations, charging locations where people who are buying electric cars and paying a lot of money for these electric cars don't really know how the charging works, which is cool and kind of scary all at the same time. It's cool because that means electric cars are becoming mainstream, where people are buying them and not worried at all about how they work as far as putting energy in them, which, is cool, but it's also a problem because when they go to charge it, they don't know how it works. I mean, they can figure out how to plug it in, and you might have to have an app or credit cards tied to that, but it's not that hard. But, there's just little things that come up. But for me, one of the things is I did not want to be at one of these super mega powerful high-speed chargers that can charge up to 350 and be there sitting in my car that peaks at 55. And like all electric cars, the fuller the battery gets, the slower the car charges. So the Bolt that I used to have could get to a point where it's charging and I'm sitting there for 20, 30, and even a few times 40 minutes while now there's people lining up to charge. Another side note, by the way, a lot of new cars. The Ioniq, cars from Hyundai, cars from Kia, cars from Volkswagen, of course, and many other manufacturers, they come with 2 or 3 years of free charging from Electrify America or EVgo or something like that, which is pretty cool, although it kind of isn't. So this is one of the things about charging the car. The car that I drive, the Ioniq 6, one of the reasons, getting into those reasons, is the incredibly fast charging rate. Like I said, the Bolt was theoretically 55. The Ioniq 6 can charge up to 240. So we're talking 4 to 5 times faster. So let's call it 4 times faster. So if I had a 30-minute stop before in the Bolt, I now have a 7.5-minute stop in the Ioniq 6. That is a big, big difference. Of course, if a car charges faster, it'll charge a little quicker, and you get to the point of diminishing returns where it costs more money to have the proper equipment in the car to charge faster. And if you go from 7.5 minutes of charge to 7 minutes or to 6.5 minutes, do you really notice? I mean, we're getting down to where it's cool. And I think for the Ioniq 6, it's now at parity with a gasoline car if you regularly make stops to use the bathroom and or get food. So if you just wanted to drive a gasoline vehicle from Chicago to Orlando and stop 2 or 3 times for 10 minutes of gas, okay, I can't compete with that. The electric cars still can't compete with that. But if you stop every 2 to 3 hours and get some food, because you are driving 18 to 20 hours, if you stop to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if you stop to stretch, you stop to go to the bathroom, the Ioniq 6 is now on parity with that kind of driving of a gasoline car, which is one of those reasons. But if you have a slow charging car and you pull into the station, you could be there for a while. The other important thing to know, when charging the car, like I said, it gets slower and slower. The Bolt, after 80%, 85%, gets so slow that you could technically unhook from a DC fast charger, go to a level 2 charger, and wait. The Ioniq 6, as an example, from 10 to 80% can be as quick as 18 minutes. But from 80% to 100%, depending on the charger, could take 20 more minutes, 25 more minutes. So you can add 70% in 18 minutes and then 20% more in 20 to 30 minutes. So that's one of the things people need to know. And if you don't need the extra range, when you get to 80% or something, you probably should unplug and move along, especially if there's cars waiting for you. It makes it easier if your car has long range. So another big perk for me on the Ioniq 6, at least the base model with the large battery, is rated for 361 miles of range. That's a lot. It's not the longest of any car, but I'm pretty sure it's the longest of any car in that price point, which you can get as low as, theoretically, MSRP of around 45, but up to 55, 58, even pushing 60 with more features. But 361 miles of range is only on the base model, longer range, larger battery pack, rear-wheel drive only. The big problem I have, and where I'm butthurt a little bit, is that when you go up trim levels and you get more features, air-conditioned seats, which is kind of cool, and a whole lot of other features, which are very nice to have, weren't necessary for me, but, I chose to spend more on something that's nicer and more luxurious because I have the funds. But the one thing they did on the second and third trim version of the Ioniq 6 is they changed the wheels. And I had to learn this because I'm a complete idiot sometimes about how things work with cars. When I say wheel, I don't know, maybe I'm the only person on the planet that didn't know this. Wheel means the rim. I always thought the rim and the tire together were the wheel. But no, the wheel is the rim. So when I say wheel, I mean only the rim, not including the tire part of the car. I don't know what to call that whole thing now, the whole assembly. What is a wheel plus a tire? I don't know. It's a wheel plus a tire. So on the second and third higher trims, they increased the size of the wheel from 18 inches to 20 inches. And that is a aesthetics thing. It's fancy. People like really big wheels. And I won't call them smaller tires because the total diameter of the tire, the rolling circumference of the tire is the same, but you shrink the sidewall. So with the 18-inch wheel and the conventional tire, the sidewall, the black part of the actual rubberish thing that we call a tire, is pretty generous. Of course, when you get the 18-inch wheel, the rim, which is much bigger, the outside circumference of the tire, the total diameter of the tire itself is the same, but the sidewall is much shorter, also called low profile. I know for many of you this is like basic elementary stuff, but it wasn't for me because my question was, well, if I get an 18-inch wheel instead of a 20-inch wheel, how does that not change the speedometer and the odometer readings because the tire is a different size? Okay. Well, the tire is a different size. It's an 18-inch tire, not a 20-inch tire, but when you say an 18-inch tire, that's the inner diameter, not the outer diameter. I know, it's all fucked up. But what happens is that larger wheel is heavier and more of the weight is farther from the axis of the axle. So it takes considerably more energy to spin up and to keep pushing a larger, heavier wheel with more weight further from the axis than it does a smaller wheel. And you think to yourself, well, how much could that affect the performance and or range of the car? Well, I found out exactly how much because the EPA rating on the small wheel is 361. The EPA rating on the larger wheel is 305. You lose 56 miles of range on every time you fill up the battery. If you're going long range in a car, that can freaking start to add up. That extra 56 miles of range, it might provide you at higher speeds, not 56 miles, but maybe 30 or 40 miles of range. That's an extra 30, 40 minutes every time between charge ups that you can go. That's a big deal. And the engineers and the designers of the Ioniq 6 went to a lot of trouble to make this car very, very, very efficient. It is tied with the Lucid Air as being the most efficient car available on the market today. Or at least when I bought it like 2 weeks ago. Apparently a new version of the Tesla Model 3 has come out that is tied with, or I don't think it's better, tied with or very close to the efficiency of the Ioniq 6. And good for Tesla. They were already pretty darn good, but they tweaked it a little bit, made it a little bit better. Sometimes that air efficiency or the drag coefficient, sometimes it's called a very slippery car. It slips through the air. Some neat things is it does have a sunroof. I think that's what it's called. And also when you open your windows, it's not loud. And with the windows all closed, it's so quiet because it cuts through the air very smoothly. The driving volume or the sound from driving goes down. The noise goes down. And you don't have a gasoline engine running, so that goes away. And so now you get this weird effect that you hear the tires. Normally the wind and or the engine are loud enough that you never pay attention to how loud the tires are because you never hear them. Well, now you can hear the tires on the road. I don't know, good or bad. So tire manufacturers are now working on making tires that have less noise so that you can even start to reduce or remove, probably reduce that volume. But switching from 361 miles of range to 305 miles of range, just because you changed the wheel, I don't like it. I don't like it. I'm offended by it. I'm pissed off about it. And I have struggled to try to find an easy and efficient way to fix it, but there is not. So it looks like at this point, if I want the longer range, I will have to buy smaller wheels. I could buy the manufacturer's original wheels and use something like their original tires, or I can buy custom manufactured by somebody else wheels. And I've got my eye on a few of them, but they can be $250 a piece. So that's $1,000 to replace the wheels, to take off wheels that work perfectly fine, except for they cut your range by 15 to 20%. And then, of course, the tires that are currently on the car won't fit on the smaller wheels, so you'd have to buy a set of tires. I don't know. I asked the dealership if they would give me the cheaper wheels and tires, and they said no. I said, you can even keep the more expensive wheels and tires. And they still said no. So maybe I'll put on new wheels and tires and see if I can sell the wheels and tires that came with it. But that feels like work, and I don't know. So maybe I will wait until the original set of tires wears out. And another funny thing is that I think the regular tire for this car might be like $150, but the low profile tires that you need to go on the 18-inch wheel are $350. So when it gets time to replace them, instead of spending $1,400 on 4 new tires, I can spend $600 on 4 new tires and then $800 on the smaller wheels. And for the price of 4 tires, I will have what I want without spending $1,600, $1,800, $2,000 now. I don't know. So that's just some thoughts. Other things that we were considering is, do I want a car or do I want an SUV? Of course, the SUV, you can carry more people, you can carry more cargo. If that's important for you, this is not a good car for you. The storage, it has a trunk. It is a sedan. It's a full-out sedan, 4 doors and a trunk. Even the space in the trunk is kind of small. It's actually kind of deep because the car is long. There's not a whole lot of extra room when I park it in the garage. It goes a foot from the wall in front of me and then maybe like a foot at the back between the car and the garage door when it closes. Well, that's part of the engineering to make it slippery or to make it have a low coefficient of drag. Other things about the car, of course, the internal cabin space is quite generous because the floor is really low, batteries, and there's no middle hump because there's no drive shaft through the middle of the car. So the floor is flat. The ceiling is generous. The version I got has sunroof and all kinds of other cool features. But this way, I'm expecting about 20 to 25% less electricity than the Bolt used to go the same range, which of course is nice because if you use less electricity, you don't have to put as much in. And when I want to put more in, it goes in 4 to 5 times faster than the Bolt. So long range driving is much, much nicer. And of course, you have some more space to sit. The seats are wickedly better than the economical Bolt, which again, in town, absolutely delightful. You will love that, especially if you have a place to charge at home or a low cost or free level 2 charger that you have access to somewhere in your community. The other thing that I really wanted from a next electric car, and this car has it, is a thing that's called vehicle to load. It can also be called vehicle to house, vehicle to grid. And this is expressed as V, the letter V, capital V, the number 2, and then one more letter, which is Could be an L for load, G for grid, H for house, or X, vehicle to X, which means you can pull electricity from the car to power other things. So if a hurricane comes to the Central Florida area, there is now a possibility with a small adapter device that I can use my Ioniq 6. And there's more and more cars that can do this now. And I can power stuff. So all Ioniq 6 have the ability to do vehicle to load from the port where you would charge in the car. And so instead of putting electricity into the car, you pull electricity out of the car. The simplest way, of course, is you then hook up a heavy-duty extension cord, run that into your house, and you can plug things into a power strip. It's 15 amps. So it's not going to power your whole freaking house. It is not going to run an air conditioner. It is not going to run a pool pump. It's not going to run your oven. It can run a refrigerator. Matter of fact, watched a nice video. Guy did a refrigerator and a range and then used a little cooktop. And then, of course, it can run your Wi-Fi, your router, your PC or laptops. You can charge your phones. You can plug in a whole bunch of LED lights because they take almost nothing. You can plug in some fans. A space heater? Probably not. And if you run a space heater, it's going to have to be a small and efficient one, and it probably be the only thing that you're plugging in. But if you're somewhere extremely north and it's the winter and it makes all the difference that the only thing that you can run is a space heater, go for it. You're going to be happy you have that versus not having it. So for me, it was a very efficient way to not be in the dark. And like I said, if it happens in the summer, it could still be very hot and humid. Probably won't run the dehumidifier because it would never, would take up a good chunk of that energy and not produce much result. But you can have lights. You can keep your food in the fridge and the freezer, have a fan, and have internet and have access to the internet and use your phone and laptop. On my car, if I do that, and if I draw something like 10 or 12 out of the possible 15 amps, you could do that for 5 to 6 days. And you can set the car how low do you want the car battery to go. And it's possible, since you have the internet, you could find out that there's a charging station near to you that's working, even though your power is out. And you drive over there and you can top off your car again. But it can go for 5 or more days. But maybe after 2 or 3 days, I want to get out and I go top off the car. And bam, I'm good for another 5 to 7 days, depending on how much I use. The trim level that I bought has an additional way to get electricity out of the car battery through a conventional outlet underneath the back seat, where your heels might be if you're sitting in the back seat. There's a plug. So I could plug in a second heavy-duty extension cord and run that in the house and run a whole nother. This one's a 16 amp. Why one is 15 amps and one is 16 amps? I do not know, but it's nice. It would double the amount that I could use. Of course, I still would not be able to run anything like an air conditioner. Furnace blower motor probably is out, and the pool pump, clothes dryer, oven. These things I would not try to want to use. You might be able to use a microwave. I got to call back the electrician. He's supposed to give me a quote on putting an inlet into the breaker panel that's in my garage. And with this inlet and the proper hardware, I can connect my car to provide electricity to the electric panel. Now, again, it can't power everything, but I could have the kitchen lights and I can have the kitchen outlets and the refrigerator. And I don't even have to run a cord into the house. I just have to have a small cord to go from the car to the inlet on the panel in the garage. And I have to turn off the main breaker so no electricity leaves that panel and goes back to the grid, because you don't want to electrocute someone trying to fix your power supply. But once I'm disconnected from the grid, I can then plug in the car and then turn on 3, 5, 6 different breakers, depending on how small they are, and use a little bit of electricity, lights, fans, and just plug them into the certain outlets within the house that are now powered by the car. I think that's cooler than fuck. So that was a very important thing for me, that not only can this car do it, but the trim level I've got, it can do it twice. So it's a 5-passenger, 4-door sedan. It's not an SUV. It's wickedly efficient. It charges as fast as almost any car available through what is the 800-volt architecture. Charges amazing speed, very short time to charge, very long distance compared to most electric cars. And also, and this is just a me thing, the very back of it has a fin kind of thing to break up the wind, and it kind of looks like a Porsche 911, which when I was a kid was a very, very popular, trendy, hot car that you would want to own if you had money. I can't imagine spending that much money on a car, but it does kind of look like the back of a Porsche 911. So those are some of the thoughts and processes in my head of why this car. The fast charging, the much longer range, very slippery, fuel efficient, energy efficient. It can power some things in the house twice on the higher trim level. Very nice car, very nice controls, and a lot of information, on the multiple screens. Just a delightful car, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy it a lot. But if you have specific questions about the Ioniq 6 or other electric cars, I've looked at a bunch of them. I don't know a lot about luxury electric cars because I was not going to spend $100,000 or $80,000. I can't believe I spent the amount of money that I did spend. But that's what I did. So that's a lot of information, much longer than I expected to go on about this, but about the Ioniq 6 that I bought.
Stephen Fry, the question about the Catholic Church apparently doesn't condemn homosexuality, that question asked.
Well, I'm afraid it simply does. It does condemn it, yes. It calls it, the official word is disorder, but it was refined by the current pontiff, Ratzinger, who called it a moral evil. But on the other hand, we must remember, as the point that was made, is that the Church is very loose on moral evils, because although they try to accuse people like me who believe in the empiricism and the Enlightenment of somehow what they call moral relativism, as if it's some appalling sin, where what it actually means is thought, they, for example, thought that slavery was perfectly fine. Absolutely okay, and then they didn't. They thought until the year 2000 that a baby went to limbo, causing unbelievable distress to parents whose child died.
Okay.
Unbelievable distress. And then, with a wave of the hand and a stamp of a seal, it was no longer true. Something that had been eternally, or at least true for 2,000 years, suddenly wasn't. Because the truth is complicated. It's hard. And what is the point of the Catholic Church if it says, oh, well, we couldn't know better because nobody else did? Then what are you for?
Okay.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody, welcome back. And with me, I have David Fitzgerald. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. It's great to be here.
Oh, thank you for coming again. It's great to have a friend of the show. And of course, we just visited at BajaCon in Canadazy.
Yes.
That was fun.
Yeah. Super fun. Yeah, once I got over the shock that it's not going to be held in the Bahamas or Baja, California, had an absolute blast. Absolute blast there.
BahaCon. Now there's something somebody should do that I can show up to.
There you go.
Wow, nice. Yeah, a great conference, lots and lots of great friends there. And of course, you did a presentation, and maybe, if you didn't have anything else planned to start with, tell us about what you did.
Yeah, I gave a talk, was sort of a sneak preview about the book I'm working on now. I think most of you probably know me for my books Nailed and Jesus, Mything in Action, which argues that Jesus never actually existed as a historical person, but was a completely invented character. Well, one of the side effects of having looked into that historicity battle for the last 20 plus years is how many times Buddhists would come up to me and say, yeah, we're having the same debates in our circles about where the Buddha was real. and how many ex-Muslims would come up to me and say, yeah, we're having the same debates in our circles whether Muhammad was real or not. And that kind of blew my mind. And so I was getting ready for some conference talks in 2021, and I thought, you know what, I should just go through all the top 10 religions in the world and see if any of the other ones also have a dodgy backstory to their founder figures.
Nice.
And it turns out every single one of them, every one of them is dodgy to the point where, for at least the major world religions, it looks like none of them were real people. They are all made up people, just like Aesop, just like Ned Ludd and William Tell, all these, any number of figures you can think of. They're folk heroes.
Like what is
allegory.
it? Robin Hood and King Arthur. That
Same.
That there might be some inkling somewhere, but then it just got glamorized and mythicized and enlarged. And then
right, but what the funny thing is, the deeper you go into any one of these stories, like King Arthur, for example, the less you find anything that looks like some kind of kernel of truth that got exaggerated and embellished on. Most of these, I would say even all of these, look like they began as completely made up stories.
But why would people do that? That's the fascinating thing, of course, because it leads to, why?
Sure. And I mean, psychologists and folklorists probably have better answer to it than I do. But it's like, this seems to be the way that major world religions are invented. It's probably the way all world religions are invented, but not all of them rise to the occasion, or, not all of them rise to the world stage the way the top 10 have.
Well, they're top 10 because they're now top 10. I mean, it's
right.
It's a fickle wind. It's kind of like evolution. Religions morph and change for incidental reasons, and then some things become very beneficial and spread the religion. As an example, I think, if I have the word correctly, the Shakers in the United States, North America, the Shakers, one of their big foundational tenets was that men and women couldn't interact and had different parts of the building or the compound. And even when they would come together to share dinner, they'd have different tables. And when you keep all the men from all the women, you tend to have less kids.
Exactly. And I think no sex was also one of their tenets, in fact.
Yeah.
But there's a good evolutionary reason why we only have their furniture and not any Shakers.
Well, and the broom. They perfected the broom. So we have that. We have them to thank for that, because no one else could have ever come up with a broom. But apparently, these. I guess if it was a real person, I don't know if it's a real person and that person dies. Does the religion? How are the people that were following Harold Camping doing? Do you know? I guess I don't hear from them.
Yeah, if you don't remember Harold Camping, he was the guy who predicted, was it 2011, 2013, that the end of the world was coming, and his whole radio empire gave him all their money, and then the day came and went. It was just another day, and he was like, oh, well, did not even particularly put out about it or bother to retract anything or put out an apology. It was like, oh, well, I'll just take my $60 million, and it'll be another day. So.
Absolutely. And, of course, you have the Mything in Action, Volume 1, 2, and 3, The Heretic's Guide to Western Religion, and at least 2, 3, and 4, because the first one was about Mormons, and then 2, 3, and 4 are more examinations on Jesus. And you're leaning, I guess, it would be fair to say, that he never really existed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, that's been my suspicion for a long time. Since about 2000 was when I first got, in 2000, it didn't occur to me ever that there was no Jesus. But what occurred to me was that when you read the four Gospels, our only real biographical information for him that holds up, A, they all seem to be taken from the first Gospel, and B, it seems to be a complete allegory. And so, since well over 2 decades now, I've been pretty convinced that there's no Jesus at all, and kind of impossible that there could have been even. And the thing that blows my mind now is that seems to be the norm for all the major world religions, that these are characters that are made, and they all begin as once upon a time stories. We don't have contemporary historical accounts of any of these figures. Generally, it's generations, if not centuries later after the fact, and that's definitely the case with Muhammad, who surprised me the most. I think that because I tend to think of him as so much later than the others, but Islam and Sikhism are two brand new religions, and they seem to be just as mythically based as any of the other ancient religions.
Now, Mormonism at least has someone that really existed. I mean, there was the founder.
Yeah, absolutely. The difference between Mormonism and all these ancient religions is we know who the guy behind the curtain was for Mormonism. It wasn't the prophet Mormon who wrote the Book of Mormon. It wasn't Angel Moroni who inspired him. Those are mythical characters. But all the Joseph Smiths in history, we know very few of them, if any at all, for most religions. But him, we've got all the smoking guns are there.
Well, and he was a really, really nice guy that was just out to help people in the world, right?
Yeah, if you've ever seen the series that Bryce Blankenagel and I did for Mythvision podcast, The Secret History of Mormonism, we kept saying, HBO, I hope you're listening, because this is your next Game of Thrones. Early Mormon history. It's just freaking full of sex and violence. It's amazing.
Well, why haven't you yet hit up Jehovah's Witnesses or the what's the guys with Lord Xenu?
Oh, Scientologists.
Yeah, them.
For the longest, I do mention them in the new book, just mostly to say, yeah, they wish they were a world religion. And maybe if they spent more time out of court trying to protect their legal status from being a criminal organization, maybe they would be. But as far as Jehovah's Witnesses, I fully set out to do a Jehovah's Witness book. And the sad thing is A, there's some good Jehovah's Witness books out there. But B, Jehovah's Witnesses are so boring compared to Mormons. It's just a sad, biblical school, Bible schools that went toxic, and it's just like, ugh. At least with Mormons, you've got sex and violence and all this weird steampunk Scientology going on with their crazy beliefs.
I recently had someone, very common here in Florida, they knock on your door to sell solar panels to you. And he knocks on my door and explains he works for the solar panel company. And then just out of the blue, he says he's Mormon.
Oh.
And I was like,
so I'm used to knocking on doors.
Yeah. And I said, don't do that. And he goes, what do you mean don't do that? And I said, that's so laughably, easily falsifiably, ridiculously untrue that people won't take you seriously if you say that out loud. And he said, oh, no. Can you say that again? And so I did.
Oh, no.
And then he said, well, that's kind of rude. It was so sweet, right? And I said, you're right. I can totally understand how you would see that as rude. That makes a lot of sense. If you were on the roof of a 10-story building and you were going to walk off the edge because you thought it was perfectly safe, and I prevented you from doing so, at the moment that I did it, you could feel like I was preventing you from walking the way you wanted to, but I actually was saving your life, and I think this is the same thing.
That's not a bad analogy, honestly.
I was pretty happy with it. That's why I'm telling you, because he was like, oh, that makes sense. And then we talked about religion or his religion for an hour. And, of course, he had one of these things. He's like, well, I grew up Mormon, and then for a couple of years I was atheist, and now I'm Mormon again. And I'm like, were you really?
Tell me about those atheist years.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah,
what
you
is
and Lee Strobel.
What does that mean you were an atheist? Does that mean you, had caffeine? I mean...
What convinced you to be an atheist?
Yeah. The new book, which I keep wandering away from, when is that coming out, and what's it called?
It's called Playing God, An Evolutionary History of World Religion, and I hope to have it out this year. I hope to have it out in a matter of months, or at least to have the first draft done in a month or two.
And so when you say this year, you mean calendar 23?
Calendar 23. I'd like to at least, if not have it out by the end of this year, early next year, but soon, very soon.
Because you know what this book would be a perfect Christmas present.
Wouldn't it though? Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got to jump on it, and we'll just see. It's a matter of finding the time to be able to give it the time it's due, and it's not even a matter of finding stuff to write about. It's trying to distill it down so I'm not trying to write a book for every chapter in this, because I'm at the portion of the book where the book is in 3 parts. The first part talks about all the evolutionary stages that world religions seem to go throughout history. The second part talks about the surprising evolution of monotheism. And the third part just looks at the biographies of these founder figures and kicks a tire on it. And just doing the Christian chapter, the Judaism chapter, the Islam chapter, there's just so much. Every one of those could be a book on its own. I'm trying to keep it from being a book. I just want to hit all the main points without, creating an encyclopedia.
Yeah, you don't get paid more for a larger page count, do you?
No. In fact, if you're not careful, it'll happen with Jesus, Mything, and Action. That was all meant to be one book, but it would be the size of a phone book if we had done that. So if I'm not careful, I'll have 3 books and not a single book.
Yeah, but this way with the Jesus, Mything, and Action, I was able to pay 3 times to get tokens to listen to it. So
there's that. So maybe I should just not worry about that and just let the book be as long as the book's going to be. But I am trying to keep it short, but thorough, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's not too oxymoronic.
It's always a balance. So, and I think one of the very important things you said with your presentation, where you're pretty convinced that there's insufficient evidence, and I'm pretty sure I'm with you there. But even if there was compelling evidence that there was a dude wandering around the Middle East circa 2,000 years ago, it still wouldn't fucking matter, because the rest of it's all bullshit.
Yeah, and that's a good point to make. It's like, I'm not dogmatic about the fact there was no Jesus. If it turned out we did, uncover some good information for Jesus, some good evidence for Jesus, rather, I'd be writing a book about that. I don't have a dog in the hunt.
Yeah,
but,
it's one of those things. I'm pretty sure that at least not in the way that it's described in the Bible, that person ever existed. Maybe there was someone with that name, or multiple people with that name, or that's the name given to a character.
Well, and here's the thing. There's nothing implausible about that. There's absolutely nothing implausible with Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha, any of these guys being an actual person. And as you say, their religions will still be as fake and will just be fine as atheists, whether there was a real guy or a bunch of guys behind the scenes making this religion up. But the fact is, the more I look into it, the less it feels like we're barking up the wrong tree to try to find some guy or some collection of guys who made the real, quote unquote, air quotes, Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha. It seems like these are made up characters making theological points in these allegorical stories. And it's very interesting when you study all these world religions. Even though they look different, sound different, talk different, have different rules, different art, everything. When you just look at how they're put together and the things that happen in the evolution of the religion, they all start to look alike. It's like, oh yeah, we passed this down through oral tradition, and then it all got lost, by horrible accident, and it was all written hundreds of years later. But we know it's true because blah blah blah, reasons, and they use the same excuses. They use the same kind of shaggy dog stories to explain the origins of the religion.
Absolutely.
And it's very funny seeing historians who specialize in the Buddha or Zoroaster. They get so worked up when you question the the validity of them historically. And even guys who should know better, they really, Christian ministers should have no reason to really love Zoroaster, but they do, and it's probably because they can recognize on some sense that if it wasn't for Zoroastrianism in Persia, we wouldn't have Judaism, we wouldn't have Christianity, we wouldn't have Islam. So it's just funny that the dichotomy of that.
Yeah. Now, before I forget, I do want to mention the other book series that you did with your wife, with Dana. And it's Dana Fredste. That's right?
That's right. That's right.
The Time Shards series, which we've talked about in detail before, so I don't want to spend too much time. But if people are looking for something new that's sci-fi kind of thing. I do think you guys struck on something original and very creative. And of course, really fun books, at least for me to listen to, because I very rarely find the time to read books, but I pay people to read them. The audiobooks are fantastic.
Thanks so much to hear. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that trilogy, I just love that series. It was one of the most challenging things to write and one of the most fun things too, because I had to do as much research as I would for any historical book, and you have to make everything up. So it was like kind of, in one sense, it was the worst of both worlds, but it paid off so nicely. I really love the reviews it's gotten. I've had fellow authors say, "I can't stop thinking about your book." That's the stuff you want to hear about the book.
Yeah. So when's it going to be in theaters?
Oh God, from your mouth to God's ear, right? Well, the funny thing, there's at least two people shopping it in Hollywood, or has been, but that's such a long shot. I'm not really expecting anything to come out of that, but it's not impossible.
No, I've seen movies of worse books, I'll tell you that.
Right? Yes. Yeah. But yeah, that is a super fun trilogy to read for science fiction fans out there, or even just adventure fans, really.
Yep. And of course, years ago, you were writing different kinds of books, right? You still promoting that? They still out there to be bought?
Whatever do you mean, Phil? I don't. I'm confused. I don't know what you're referring to. It was funny. That used to be my joke at cocktail parties.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I write erotica and biblical literature, or history. Guess which sells more? But then the joke was on me, because when Nailed came out, boom! Now that totally outsold anything I had in the erotica department. Now I just don't have time to do erotica anymore. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Well, I mean, I think you've kind of covered it already. I think you had a presentation. Was that your presentation about the sex in the Bible and?
Oh, sex and violence in the Bible. Yes.
Yeah, sexy Bible violence, or something like that.
It was sexy violence, violent sex, the weird ass morality of the Bible.
Yeah.
And what's funny about that is that was in 2020, 2021 maybe, but I actually stopped halfway through writing the Sex and the Violence in the Bible book, because I got so blown away by all the recent historical, archaeological findings, especially with Judaism, especially with Islam, showing that Judaism in particular is so much younger than we think, like it's by over 1,000 years younger.
Yeah, it's not 5,000 or 4,000 or even 3,000, 2,600, 2,500 years old.
Yep.
But I mean, when you don't have a whole lot of writings, something that happened 200 or 300 years ago is forever.
Yeah. It really blows my mind, just the state of the findings, the current findings right now.
And of course, in like the next 3 or 4 years, everyone on the planet is going to be non-religious now? You've got that tied up?
Seriously, the demographics on religion just continue to drop and drop, as much as the sad thing is what's happening is Christianity is losing its youngest people, it's using its most open-minded people, and its most rational people. So you're left with this old, crusty, nutty, whack job, fact-proof, crunchy center of Christianity, which is really sad, because we see how ugly they get when they're feeling put upon.
Yeah. A lot of things in life are like that. And I don't want to turn it to the subject, but I was thinking about politics. I think it was, what's her name? Cecily from Saturday Night Live.
Cecily Strong?
Yeah. I still remember the joke. She was at one of these luncheons for
White
writers.
House press car.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And she had the joke, something like, last year Fox News lost 2 million viewers. May they rest in peace. Because it's it's older. It's a lot of white. It's a lot of male. And the people who are at least, I don't know, exposed to reality more, because I've talked to people that have really weird ideas and views, religion, politics, and other things, and often they are not stupid people. They've just been convinced of something that's not true, and they lack the ability to work their way out of it.
You know, it's funny. I talk about this to Christian friends of mine. Most Christians I know are Christians for good, rational, real reasons that have nothing to do with Christianity being good or rational or real.
Yeah? What are those good reasons?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, they got a social net.
Okay. Yeah,
all the tangible, or intangibles that are.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's definitely merit if you're Methodist and you move to almost any city in the United States of America, and you don't know anybody, you just got a new job, and you're struggling, you're trying to move and make ends meet. You show up to the local Methodist congregation and say, "Hey, I'm Methodist."
Instant extended family. Yeah, exactly.
There's merit to that, and maybe we'll build that without religion, but I don't know. We've tried. We're trying. It's getting there.
I was going to say it's still too young to say we've failed on that.
That's true. Well, that's why the conferences are so much fun, and I know this is the case for you, where you can show up, and I know I can show up, and I can see people that I hadn't seen since the before time. Before COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, oh my God. So even though a Baja Con was short, and our trip there, we arrived Friday afternoon and left Sunday afternoon. I was still just so much joy, so much delight to see old friends and make new friends all at the same time.
Yes,
so.
Absolutely. And it just, you don't realize how much more of an impact you get when it's in person until you're there, and it's like, yes, I miss this so much.
I just don't want them to end.
Right?
I coined the acronym PCD, post convention depression.
Yeah,
because I'm some of these, you go to 3 or 4 days and you hang out with people and you share drinks and you have stories and you have great talks and maybe some parties and time at the bar. Yep. And then on Monday or Tuesday, you're back at your regular work. Now, thankfully for me, at least now, I really like my job. But years ago when I worked for the man as well,
yes,
that was brutal.
Back to the grind.
Yeah. I know your time is short today because you're a very busy man writing books and everything. And of course, we've got people.
Blaspheme's not going to write itself.
We got people in the house, but is there anything we haven't covered that you really want to make sure we do discuss?
Oh gosh, just stay tuned for Playing God, and if you're interested in the Jesus myth idea, check out my book Nailed. Check out my books Jesus Mything in Action, and stay tuned. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, David Fitzgerald, thank you so much for coming on the Phil Ferguson Show and keeping us up to date on what you're working on. I appreciate it very much.
Very much appreciate the invite, and give my love to Mrs. Ferguson and the little Fergusons.
You bet. Will do. Time for a quick wrap up. Just as a reminder, in a few weeks, I will be in Madison, Wisconsin for the FFRF convention, annual convention, Freedom from Religion Foundation, and was able to visit this last weekend with Annie, Lori, and Dan from the FFRF because they were at Baja Con. So I'm expecting to see a lot of friends again that I saw just a couple weeks ago. And of course, many, many other friends that maybe I haven't seen for months or years at the FFRF conference in Madison, Wisconsin. So if you're in the Midwest and you're always like, oh God, why are the conferences always so far away? Well, here's one in fucking Madison, Wisconsin. So check your calendar. Go look up the FFRF convention. I don't have the dates off the top of my head. It's going to be a great convention. Absolutely reasonable prices. It's in Madison. You're going to love it. What a great town. And of course, I'm going to be there. And of course, you're going to be there. So that's fantastic. So if you can do that, go do that. And of course, if you see me, please feel free to come up and say hello, and forgive me if I don't remember your name because I've been very busy and maybe I haven't seen you for a couple of years. Who knows? A few weeks after that, I will be in Las Vegas for the CFI, Center for Inquiry, and the conference is CSI Con, and it's the closest thing to replacing the amazing meetings that used to happen in Las Vegas. So that's a couple weeks later after FFRF in Madison, Wisconsin. So got some fun traveling trips going to see a whole bunch of friends that I haven't seen in a while. Looking very, very much forward to that. I guess I'll just wrap up the show. Maybe I'll go drive my car around. Yeah, see how that's doing. If you have questions about the car or EVs in general, let me know. But I'm just going to wrap up, and I do hope to see you out there somewhere on the road. And please do say hello. Until that happens, ciao.